On October the 31st, 1517, Martin Luther posted 95 big questions which he believed faced the church of his day to a local church door in Wittenberg, Germany. 500 years later, I decided to post 95 new questions, one a week, to the web, questions which I believe the church must face in the 21st century. Love God, love your neighbour the way you love yourself. That's it. Over the last couple of months, we've been exploring the three parts of Jesus' groundbreaking integrated statement, which he insisted summarised the real meaning of the entire Old Testament law and prophets. And if it isn't the first Chalke Talk you've watched or listened to, you'll know that we've been working through these three interlinked principles backwards, which, though it sounds strange, is exactly the way that countless groups of followers of Jesus have chosen to think about his revolutionary words over the centuries. So this week we finally reached the clause, love God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, said Jesus. I often hear people say things like, love myself, that's hard, that's difficult, but I get it. Love others the way I love myself, that's even tougher. But in the end, I understand how the ability to really love other people is related to developing a sense of self-love, a sense of self-worth. But loving God, loving the God of the Bible, that's different altogether. As someone memorably explained to me a few years ago, I've got enough problems in life as it is without worshipping a God who disapproves of me, regards me as vile, fills me with a sense of guilt and leaves me feeling even more of a failure than I already do. To be honest, he added, I sometimes think God's simply the invention of the elite, the powerful, the ultimate mechanism for maintaining control and keeping ordinary people like me in their places. The strange thing is that none of these thoughts about God is new. In fact, one of the major reasons for the writing of the very first story in the whole Bible, Genesis 1 as we call it, was precisely to address these issues. Genesis 1 was written as a direct attack on the popular but guilt and shame inducing creation stories that were around in the culture of the time. And far from being about guilt and shame or control and servitude, it was originally penned to free people from exactly that old narrative and to tell a different, a freeing, a liberating story. But one which sadly somehow both the church and wider society in our own day has lost again. It was back in 1849 that Henry Layard, an archaeologist, was on a dig in the ruins of the ancient city of Nineveh, which is located on the outskirts of our modern city of Mosul in northern Iraq. Whilst excavating in the ancient library of Ashurbanipal, he made an extraordinary discovery. We call it the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth. It's an epic poem, and it's recorded in the Old Babylonian dialect of Akkadian on 7 clay tablets. The Babylonians were at the time the superpower of the ancient Middle East, and Enuma Elish, named after its opening words, which in English mean when on high, features Marduk, the patron god of the city of Babylon. In fact, we've now found other, even earlier versions of the same story which feature other local gods. In other words, the names have been changed, and these become the heroes. So it tells us that the version that Layard discovered was an adaptation of an even older story. And here's the thing, each one of them, they all predate Genesis chapter 1. And Genesis has far too many similarities with them for us not to recognise that its author not only knows these old stories, but freely draws on their metaphors and their style and their structure. But here's the big twist. Genesis 1 isn't just another copy of the old story with the names changed again. Instead, it deliberately sets out to mimic and then subvert Enuma Elish. in order to create its own distinctive story. For all the similarities, there are a whole set of very significant differences. This is not plagiarism, it is deliberate subversion. Enuma Elish tells the story of the cosmic struggle between opposing gods. Tiamat, the monster goddess of primeval chaos, takes revenge for the death of her lover Apsu. But Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, one of Tiamat's children, offers to save the other gods from her anger and wrath if they appoint him as their leader. Marduk then challenges Tiamat to combat, and he slaughters her, ripping her corpse into two halves with which he creates the earth and the skies. He is then proclaimed Lord of all the gods of heaven and earth. But now, all that exists needs managing, and the minor gods, the junior gods, have to bear the brunt of that work. They complain, and so Marduk orders the creation of humankind to give the gods a rest. Humanity is an afterthought, nothing but a byproduct. Humans owe their existence to a cosmic war, the bloody murder of a mother by a son, and the laziness of the gods. They're born into servitude and hopelessness. But Genesis chapter 1 reads differently. Verse 1 states, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." And at the end of the chapter, after all that creative activity, we read, "God saw everything he had made, and it was very good." Genesis asserts its own theology, its own unique worldview. The theme of Enuma Elish is chaos and violence, but the theme of Genesis is order and peace. Enuma Elish is the story of a pantheon of dysfunctional gods locked in conflict with one another. Genesis is the story of one God who does good. In Enuma Elish, creation is the unintentional outcome of a giant divine spat. In Genesis, the act of creation is an intentional gift. Enuma Elish is a deeply nationalistic story about Babylon. Genesis is a global story which doesn't even mention Israel. Enuma Elish is about hierarchy. The story tells us that only the Babylonian king is made in Marduk's image. Genesis is about equality. Every man, woman and child is created in God's image. Enuma Elish is about divine power and control. Genesis is about divine love and freedom. In Enuma Elish, we are a byproduct of the accident of creation. In Genesis, we are its centerpiece. So, a question. What are the implications for you of the ways in which the writers of the Genesis story deliberately choose to subvert the old and sadly still all too popular ways of understanding creation and humanity?